Thank you, everybody. And the fact that I come from Pennsylvania also makes me just a general around expert, so it's perfect. All of us come to these meetings with different goals and different ideas of what we want to get out of it. I'm sure you each have your own goal for why you're here. My goal for being here and for talking with you this afternoon is to get you to think about your farm a little bit differently. I'm going to present some information here on work that I've been doing with organic no-till, which is going to hopefully challenge you to think about the resources you have on your farm and how you apply to the activities that you pursue. I'm going to start out talking about things a little bit differently here. J.I. Rodale is the founder of the Rodale Institute and the Rodale Publishing Firm and all those other things. And he's really the father of organic agriculture in North America because he's the first person to link those two words together, organic and agriculture. And he wrote on a blackboard in 1942, he wrote those words, healthy soil equals healthy food equals healthy people. So what he was telling us as farmers, at least what he was telling me, is he's saying our job as farmers is not to produce food or ethanol. It's not really even to work with the soil. It's to produce healthy people. Now, we do that by producing food, and we do that by working with the soil, but our goal, the filter that we have to run, or we should be running all of our thoughts and our decisions through, is does what we're doing on our field and on our farm produce healthy people? And my son and I farm outside of Rodale. I farm, my son has dairy cows, and we raise feed for his dairy cows on my farm, and of course on his as well. And our goal on our farm has to be to produce healthy people. So it brings to mind that, this question of why we till the soil. Because everybody will agree, I don't know if there's too many organic farmers in the room, but I know there's a few. And as organic farmers, we're always accused of tilling the soil too often. Because we do till the soil. And we till the soil so that we can produce a clean seed bed to plant our crops. Because we can't spray herbicide. Even if we could spray herbicide, most of us wouldn't spray herbicide because it doesn't really fit in that filter that I just mentioned. Because how does spraying herbicide produce healthy people? Those are the questions that we're trying to ask ourselves. But as an organic farmer that's involved in helping farmers transition into a more organic system, it brings to mind the question of how do we transition large acreage farms if what we have to tell farmers to do is mow, board, plow every year for every crop? We know that's not good, and we know that that's going to produce certain challenges that are just probably not achievable. Now, we know we can spray herbicides, and we know they work. You spray herbicides, weeds die. But there's other things that happen as well, and I'm not a soil microbiologist, but I know that spraying herbicides has a side effect of killing soil microbiology. So we were just talking today, most of the day, I've been in the room all day, we've been talking about soil health, and we've been talking about soil microbiology and how there's all these trillions of microbes in every shovelful of soil out in your field that wants to work for you, and then we go ahead and we spray it with herbicide. And the herbicide's not designed to kill the microbes, but that's what happens. So whether we till the soil and we destroy microbes that way, or we spray herbicide and we destroy the microbes that way, it leaves us in a bit of a... Because what we're really trying to do is change the soil, and I think you can even see in this photograph, that's Dr. Ray Weil from the University of Maryland holding 2 clumps of soil from our farming systems trial, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next meeting, or the next conversation. But you can see a difference in those handfuls of soil. And those 2 handfuls of soil were taken about 10 feet apart from each other in the same field. And the lighter colored soil, what we call conventional there, is not just conventional till, but it means it's got conventional herbicides and conventional fertilizers. The darker one has an organic system applied to it. But what's really exciting is when we take those 2 clumps of soil and put them in water, look what happens. So getting to the point that was made earlier today, the problem with agriculture isn't that we're farming the soil, it's the way we're farming the soil. We can farm the soil differently and get a different reaction, a different response from the soil. You can see that conventional soil there. The reason we heard about Iowa washing down the Mississippi River, the reason Iowa washes down the Mississippi River is not because we farm it. It's because of the way we farm it. When you destroy the structure of the soil, it can't possibly stay in place. It's going to wash away. So what does that mean in terms of cropping systems? This is from our farming systems trial. These are two plots side by side. That little green strip of grass there is only 5 foot wide. And these are small research plots. They're only about 100 meters long. But you can see that the one on, I'm dyslexic, the one on your right is lighter, the one on your left is darker color. They've both been growing grain crops, and in this particular case, they were both tilled and they were both planted to wheat. Look what happens when it rains. We've changed the soil's ability to manage water. And we just heard today through earlier conversations that water is really critically important to the operation of the farm. I also want to talk to you a little bit, I'm just trying to set the stage for organic no-till because we have to understand the context in which the no-till systems that we're working with fit into the overall agricultural system and plan that we're trying to accomplish. Because if we don't think about crop rotations, we can't think about managing cover crops without tillage. We just heard the conversation that went on before that you can pull into a field. One of the beauties of the strip till system is he can pull into his field in spring and decide whether he's going to plant corn or beans. I can't do that. I decided years ago, literally years ago, what was going to be in my field based on the crop rotation that I'm following. And Charles Leidy, way back in 1938 in the USDA yearbook, said that there's no other better method of weed control, mechanical, chemical, biological, whatever it is, that's as economical as a well-arranged sequence of tillage and cropping. And what's the one thing that we can control on our farm? The crops that we plant. So we can control that. There's a lot of things we can't control, but we can control what we plant, when we plant it, how we plant it, and what we're going to do in terms of cover crops. So let's just look at this chart for a minute, and it's an ugly chart, and the research team at Rodale always cringe when I put it up there because it's an old rotational slide from our farming systems trial. Not very modern looking. But if you look across the very top there, there's 5 years in this crop rotation. And running down the other column, there's 3 different cropping systems. There's a low input system with animals, which is an organic system that's just using legumes as a manure source, and then a conventional system that uses conventional fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers. And if you look at the rotation at the bottom, let's look at that one first. We got corn, soybeans, corn, soybeans. Not atypical for Midwestern agriculture. Look at all the gaps in that system. We just talked about biology being really important. That life in the soil, that biological life in the soil, needs to get its energy from the sun, just like every other living creature on Earth. The soil can't feed that biology, and the biology can't feed the soil if there isn't a green plant growing on the surface of the soil. So our goal in organic systems is to keep something green and growing on the soil, no matter how small it is. Under the snow here in Ontario, there should be something green and growing in every field. If there isn't, we're not doing our job right as farmers. In this system, we're not doing our job right because there's nothing green and growing there. So there's big gaps in the system, so we're not feeding the biology of the soil. The other thing that's happening is we're not using our resource very wisely. We're only using our resource for a few months out of the year. You look at the organic systems, you can see that we're starting to fill those gaps. There's still some gaps, and what those gaps are really windows of opportunity for us to put cover crops in. I was talking to a farmer last evening. He said he grows continuous soybeans. Continuous soybeans isn't much of a rotation. It makes getting cover crops into the system much more challenging and much more difficult. I was talking with a farmer down in Mississippi, and he said, oh, well, we've got a really complex long-term crop rotation on our farm. He said, we plant corn, and then after that we plant 99 years of cotton. It's like, yeah, it's not exactly the long-term rotation we were thinking about. So, and we do that, all over the place. We have, my neighbor has 50 years of continuous no-till corn. Corn. I wouldn't say that's a very diverse rotation. So I'm going to encourage you and challenge you when you leave this meeting to think about the crops you grow on your farm. If your goal is to produce healthy soil, and if your goal is to build up the microbiology of the soil, then your goal has to include crop rotations and cover crops. That's your challenge, to figure out how to make that work. The other thing that, that I heard as a person getting involved in no-till 20 years ago was, well, the first thing you have to do is if you grow a cover crop, in spring you got to get rid of it really early. Because if you let it get too big, it's going to be a nightmare. It's going to be there to plague the planter, the harvester, everything else. It's just going to be there. So burn it off as early as you can in the spring. Anybody else ever hear that? Yeah, people hear that all the time. But if the cover crop is out there trying to work for me, I planted it, I'm planting a legume here, and it's fixing nitrogen for me. Why would I kill it earlier? I mean, do you take your best employee and take them out back and shoot them? These are my best employees, and I'm going to till it under or burn it off early. That's not what I want to do. So if you look at this, these are just some simple clover numbers that we were generating. And you can see that on May 2nd, I had, in the crimson clover, on May 2nd, I had 167 pounds of nitrogen that was already fixed, basically for free during the winter when I wasn't using that resource. Think about the other slide when you got corn and beans and then nothing. Well, when there was nothing, I planted crimson clover, and I got 167 pounds of nitrogen. But if I left it go for another 2 weeks, it went up to 223 pounds. Why would I, and conventional wisdom would have had me burn that off a month earlier when I only had 40 or 50 pounds. Now, if your brother-in-law sells fertilizer, he's not going to like this plan too much. But otherwise, why would you not keep that cover crop out there working for you so that you can take advantage of all that nitrogen? There's a lot of cover crops that we can plant in organic systems and manage them without tillage. And I'm coming from the perspective of an organic farmer, but I will tell you that I have far more conventional farmers using the system that I'm going to talk about than I do organic farmers. Because there's a lot of benefits to planting these cover crops. The biggest benefit for me as an organic farmer is weed management and fertilizer. But there may be other benefits that you can take advantage of. Those are organic soybeans planted into a rolled cover crop. Skip over that. Just wanted to show you how much nitrogen we can actually fix. If your goal is to fix nitrogen, then you want to use the most efficient nitrogen fixer that you can. In this case, we looked at crimson clover, we looked at just about everything you can possibly think of, and for us on our farm, hairy vetch is the best nitrogen fixer we can find. This is some relatively low data, but you can see we're up there to 253 pounds. We routinely do close to 300 pounds of nitrogen that we can grab out of the atmosphere from September till May, when realistically we're not really using the soil for anything else. Now, because I'm organic, I do till the soil. That's not our farm, or it's just a picture. But I would rather till the soil to get a cover crop established than till the soil to get a cash crop established. Because if I till the soil to get a cover crop established, I can till the soil and immediately plant it. I'm choosing cover crops that germinate and grow rather quickly and rapidly, so I cover the ground again with something green and growing. So in a way, it's like tilling the soil and saying to the soil, I'm sorry, I realized that the microbes in that soil, that was not a good day. Earthworms in the soil, that was not a particularly good day. But by planting cover crops on there immediately, I can remedy that situation. And I'll show you some slides later on this afternoon that will show you very definitively that we're building soil even with tillage. We're building soil faster with tillage than you can without tillage unless you use cover crops. And we have a lot of data to support that. If you're going to plant cover crops, you have to know what the seeding rate is that you're planting. Inevitably, when I go to farms and the system's not working right, it's because people either planted at too light of rate, planted too late, or used really poor seed. So if you were going to plant your corn and you planted it 2 months late, you wouldn't expect it to do real well. But people routinely plant their cover crops 60 days, 90 days. I've had farmers call me the week before Christmas out of Iowa and say, do you think it's too late? Probably. Okay. We talked about cover crops a little bit, just touched on them, and we talked about crop rotations, and we could spend all day talking about that. But I really want to get into the tillage component of this. So we can all agree tillage has its drawbacks, not to mention we got to get the wreckers out there to pull this thing out of the ground. Fortunately, that's not my tractor. And if we're organic farmers, tilling the soil has a lot of other problems because it means we have to do a lot of secondary tillages. Because I can't spray herbicide, that means I have to go out there and cultivate, and cultivate, and cultivate. If you got 50 acres, that's one thing. You got 5,000 acres, that's a whole other ball game. Cultivating takes time. We can do a nice job, and we can manage weeds with cultivation, but we know that on hills, we open the soil up to erosion. We know that's not good. So as organic farmers, we're looking at this system and the situation and saying, how can we take advantage of modern agriculture? Because we're not going back to Greece in the 4th century or the 2,000 years BC. We're talking about taking advantage of modern plant breeding, modern ag technology, modern ag engineering, and putting it to work for us. But we're also talking about mixing in a little bit of biology and some little nuggets of information that we know work. For example, anybody here have a garden, or if somebody in their family has a garden? Yeah, everybody. We know in a garden that if we put mulch on the surface of the soil, we can stop annual weeds from growing. Can we agree with that? Yes, everybody's nodding their heads. Now, if you put mulch on the garden that's only about an inch thick, you take straw, newspaper, your mulch of choice, and you put it on the garden about 3 inches thick, it looks nice for about 10 days. And then it don't look so nice anymore, because the weeds are just going to grow right through it. But if you put it on nice and thick, you can stop weeds from growing for the whole season. Okay, if we can agree that that works, now our challenge as farmers is to try to put that to work on a bigger stage. It's not very likely that if I told you to take mulch and go out to the field and put it on the field and mulch your corn, I mean, you're from Canada, so you'd be polite and you'd listen to me, but you wouldn't agree with it. But if you can grow the mulch right in the field, and then terminate it with a tool that you don't have to use any herbicide. You do it all mechanically. And then we take advantage of modern no-till planter equipment. We can stick seeds in there. John Deere says if you can drive over it, they can get seeds in the ground. They don't care if it's blacktop. They will get seeds in the ground. That's just ag engineering. Those guys get up every morning looking for these problems to solve. This happens to be in California. This is some of the work that Dr. Jeff Mitchell was doing with me there. But that's the roller that we designed. And I think we'll all agree they can grow some serious amounts of rye. And if you can put that much biomass on the surface of the soil and plant in it, you do not have weeds. Zero. Don't have any weeds. And you can do it without herbicide. You can do it organically. Now, when I first started doing this, we didn't have the roller crimper that I designed. So we were using off-the-shelf material, tools to try to do the work we were doing. Any of you guys ever get one of those Christmas presents that says one tool does all? Yeah, we all got those. Should say one tool does nothing, because they don't work very well. So we were trying to take this tool that was designed for knocking down corn stalks or for secondary tillage to prep soil, and we were trying to roll cover crops with it, and it wasn't working. It wasn't doing what we wanted it to do. The other thing that I was told by conventional no-tillers was you have to get the residue away from, and we just heard about that with strip tillage, you got to get the residue away from where you're planting the seed so you have nice, clean soil to stick your seed in the ground. And so that's what we started doing. We started moving the residue off to the side, putting our seed in the ground, and we got seed to grow. But because we're organic and we don't spray any herbicide, we also got weeds to grow. And where are the weeds? Right in the row with the crop where they're hardest to deal with and take the most nutrients. So one day in frustration, I just took those residue managers off the planter and threw them on the back of the truck. Actually, I threw them on the ground. Somebody else picked them up and put them on the back of the truck. You ever drive through that with residue managers when they don't work right and they get all balled up, and then you spend about half a day with a screwdriver and a utility knife cutting it out? Well, that's where I was at. You know, I'd already unplugged it twice that day, so I just took them off and threw them away, and the system worked. The other thing we did was we decided to design a tool that was specifically made for rolling cover crops. And we put it on the front of the tractor as opposed to the back of the tractor. Why is that? Because if you're going to make hay, you don't drive on the hay first and then cut it. So if we're going to roll cover crops, we don't want to drive on it first and then roll it. We want to put the roller on the front. Because rubber tires on a tractor may or may not be a good cover crop roller crimper, depending on the condition of the soil and the cover crop. Because what we're really doing is we're taking these blades, which are like a hammer, and we're using the soil as an anvil, and we're pinching the cover crop between the soil, which is the anvil, and the hammer, which is the blade, and we're crimping the stem. So it's like taking a straw that you want to suck a milkshake through, and you have your kids bend it like 7 times and kink it all up, and then try to suck through it. It doesn't work. Well, that's what the plant's trying to do. It's trying to suck water out of the ground, and you just kink the straw. As long as that cover crop is in full bloom, and it's an annual or winter annual, I don't care what it is, you can kill it with that roller. It will die. The other thing that we did in the design of this was we used a 16-inch diameter cylinder. I said I'm not an ag engineer. I'm not. When we decided how big this should be, we stood up by a tractor and we said, okay, if it's like 4 foot high, it's going to look like a steamroller, and people will think, Jeff's lost his mind. If it's 6 inches, it would look like a little toy out there. So we decided that 16 inches was a good size. And we did that by holding different size wheels in front of the tractor, and we found a bicycle rim that really looked kind of good. And that's what we used. And then we went to the salvage yard and we found 4-inch steel blades. So people always say, how'd you come up with 4 inches? It's like that was what they had at the salvage yard that was already pre-cut, and it was really nice. The one thing we did do is you can see they're leaned back about a little over 10 degrees off of 90 when they're welded onto the cylinder. And that's because if we welded them 90 degrees to the cylinder, what would happen is as we were driving, the tip of that blade would actually rip and tear at the cover crop, and it pulls the cover, just like cleats on a track machine. When they go around the final drive in the rear, you can see they throw dirt and dust, and we don't want to tear the cover crop. But we have a lot of Mennonite neighbors in our community, and they use steel wheels on their tractors. And they said, well, if you lean the blade back, because they don't want to chop up their hay fields, they said if you lean the blade back, the tip of the blade lifts off the soil at an angle, and there's no ripping or tearing. It's like perfect, just what we needed. The other thing you'll see is our blades are in this chevron pattern. Again, not very good ag engineering, but here's the way it worked. If you put the blade straight across from one end to the other, nice and straight, so this goes straight across, what happens, this is ours up here, goes straight across. What happens is on the front of the tractor, you got a blade on the ground, a blade in the air, blade on the ground, blade in the air, and it bounces. And you feel that bouncing in the steering wheel. So if you want to send your kids out there to go through the field, that might be fun, but I don't want to do it. So trying to figure out how to solve that problem, and I was at home one evening, and my wife was rolling out pasta on a cutting board. And if you ever saw a pasta cutter, it looks like a rolling pin with blades on it, just like this. Again, nothing novel. And all they do is they took the ends of that cylinder and they twist it. So now the blade is a spiral, and when you roll it, it's perfectly smooth. There's no bouncing on the cutting board. So I was like, wow, why don't we do that with our machine? We'll just grab the ends of that roller and twist it, and now it's a spiral and it'll be nice and smooth. The problem is you've also created a screw. And we farm on hills. If you're screwing the front of the tractor uphill, it's not so bad. But when you turn around and go the other way, you can get the point. So we said, while we were discussing that, I was discussing with my neighbor, and I was leaning on a New Holland hay bind, and you know how the roller crimpers are on that? They look just like this. Actually, ours looks like theirs. Because I'm leaning on it, and he said, well, why don't you make it like that? I said, make it like what? He goes, like that. So we twisted both ends to the middle, and now it's neutral, the draft is neutral, and it doesn't pull up or down a hill in either direction. The other thing that we did by mistake, but it works really well, is if you think about this roller, I don't know how to back up with this thing. If you think about the roller, when it's twisted like that, the weight of the blade, the weight of the machine on the surface of the crop only touches the surface of the soil at a very small point of contact, maybe 2 inches on each side. But those 2 inches moves along the length of the blade back and forth, so your crimping pattern is really on an angle. It looks like an X when it goes through the field. But it crimps every 7 inches. What that does is it multiplies, an ag engineer said, well, you just multiplied the weight of that roller by about 10-fold. So a roller that weighs a ton actually works like it weighs 10 tons, but you don't have to pick up 10 tons. Kind of cool. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than to be good. Okay, we're organic farmers. So we plant corn, and this was a cornfield that was in alfalfa. Alfalfa is a perennial. You're not going to kill a perennial with a roller crimper. People always ask me, can I kill thistles? No, this isn't magic. This is just simple biology. Because this was an alfalfa field, we moldboard plowed it. So I know you hate that word, but we plowed it, we disced it, we cultipacked it, and I planted it. Then because I'm organic, I had to rotary hoe it twice, I went over the field 9 times. I got 143 bushel of corn. Over here, I had a plot that was in hairy vetch, which was a winter annual. I put the roller on the front, the planter on the back. It was one pass over the field, came back and harvested it. No fertilizer. No, I didn't have to put fertilizer in because the fertilizer was already there. Unlike the last speaker, we're fertilizing the soil. We're trying to get the soil to grow the crop, not the inputs to grow the crop. So again, it's a whole different way of thinking about things, but that's the reason we come to these meetings, to get all this information, to figure out what's going to work for you on your farm. But anyway, I got 160 bushels of corn. I actually showed this slide to a room full of economists at Penn State University, and they weren't as polite as you. Somebody yelled from the back of the room, "Yeah, but can you prove you saved money?" They weren't farmers, they were economists. So, this is just a picture over the hood of the tractor. This is our tractor. You can see the roller kind of in the front here, a little corner of it. And this is hairy vetch in full bloom. This part over here is planted. This part is not planted. There's the planter going through the field. That's how we're planting corn today. If you're an organic farmer or even a conventional farmer, and you can plant corn like that without doing any tillage, think about what you're doing for the health of your soil, for the biology that's living in that soil. You had something growing on that soil all winter long, then you came through and you killed it. So we eliminated the need for tillage and herbicide, both in that system. Both those things are killing the microbial life of the soil. Both of those things we want to work because we don't want to kill that microbial life in the soil. Let's just look at some financial figures here, because it doesn't make sense to do this stuff if it doesn't work with a sharp pencil. Just go over some of the highlights of this. We're going to look at, up here on the top, we have organic, hopefully you can read this. This is organic tilled systems, and this is 3 years worth of data. Organic tilled, organic no-till, conventional tilled, and by conventional till, that's a chisel plow, and then conventional no-till, which is no tillage at all. We don't have an economist that works at Rodale, so we use Mississippi State. They have a budget calculator, and we worked with the person who generated that, or built that generator, and they ran our numbers through there. And this is from 2008 and 2010 data, but it's in a 34-year study, so we have a lot of rich history of data behind this study. But we just chose those 3 years. The 3-year average for organic corn during that time period was $8.36 a bushel. The 3-year average for corn prices at that time was $4.15 at our location, US dollars. Now, conventional corn has dropped and organic corn has gone up. That's just a supply and demand. So the numbers would actually be more drastically in favor of the organic system. But if you look at the conventional tilled system with a chisel plow, if you grew 100 bushel of corn per acre, you actually lost $16 for every acre you produce corn on, using our input data. If you grew 200 bushel of corn, you actually made $400 an acre. Good money. But most people say, well, I don't do conventional tillage, I no-till. When you no-till, because you spend more money on other input items, you actually lost more money. So we're going in the wrong direction there. The organic tilled system, because organic prices have a premium price, you can see that $8 versus $4, at 100 bushel, we were making $500 an acre. And in the no-till, because we reduced our input costs, we were actually making $578 at the same time we were losing $85 with the other systems.
Yeah. Quick math, why is your seed cost so much higher in no-till versus conventional till?
The difference between the seed costs is in conventional till, we were not using GMO seed, and we weren't paying the trait fees. In the other system, we were paying the trait fees, and you can see we also had, this was a hybridized system. We actually put some hairy vetch in that system to lower our nitrogen costs. You can see we lowered our fertilizer cost because we paid for vetch seed. That's why the seed cost was higher there. And you'll see that the seed cost is typically higher in the organic system because of the cover crop. We're putting more money into seed, but you can see our nitrogen fertilizer cost was 0. The reason these systems work is because we're looking at the biology of what's happening in the soil. And if you've ever, I was a middle child, so I was lucky. I had smaller brothers, younger brothers, and you know, we had this kind of rule at the table that whoever is the oldest gets to eat the most and gets to eat what they want. You know, you get to pick first. If you're a younger brother, it was funny because I had a niece that just got married a few years ago, and was at the wedding, and my brother had a little too much to drink, and so he was telling me how scared of me he was. You can see I'm not a big person, and he's much bigger than me, but he's even scared of me today because I'm the big brother. You know, those things never go away. Well, the same thing's true in the soil. If you've got a plant that's already there, germinated and growing, and is pulling water out of the soil and cycling nutrients, there's no room for weeds at the table. They're not going to germinate and grow there because their chance of survival is very small. So when we have thick, dense stands of cover crops, we rarely have any weeds. That's what we're trying to take advantage of with these systems. And again, we're talking about thick, dense stands of cover crops. If you have thin, wispy, spindly stands because either you didn't get it planted on time or you said, oh, you know, cover crop seed's expensive, so I only put it in at half the rate, well, then you're going to get half the success, and then you're going to say it doesn't work. Just putting this in here, not that the numbers mean much, just trying to remind myself to tell you that in order for these systems to work, you need a lot of biomass on the surface of the soil. You can't mulch it at 1.5 inches thick. It'll look nice the day you plant it, but it's not going to last through the season and give you the kind of weed management that you need. So we're talking about a minimum of 5,000 pounds of dry matter, and really we're aiming for 8,000. I know in 2014, last year's cropping season, we're getting really good at growing cover crops and cover crop mixes. I had 15,000 pounds of dry matter, and I could still get the planter to go through that. You couldn't walk through it. You couldn't have gotten through that field hardly with a machete. It was that thick and dense, and that planter just ran right through it and sliced through it and stuck the seed in the ground. Just want to show you that not all cover crops are created equal. This is all rye. This is some work that we're doing with Dr. Chris Reberg-Horton down at North Carolina, and he's just showing that you can go anywhere from, he's got 7,000 pounds up to almost 12,000 pounds of dry matter just by changing varieties. So the variety that you pick to plant of cover crop is huge. We'll talk about that some more. You also have to make sure that you're sticking the seed in the ground. You're asking an awful lot of your corn planter or your soybean planter or your grain drill or your transplanter or whatever it is that you're trying to use. You're asking a lot of that, and you got to make sure the ground. If you have seed that's laying on the surface of the soil, those seeds aren't going to germinate and grow. You got to slice through this residue and get the seed out. There's tools out there that can help you do that. We're using some Yetter residue managers right now. I know there's a Yetter stand out here. Didn't get to talk to those folks. But we're using a Yetter shark tooth on soybeans in particular. I don't use it on corn, but I use it on soybeans and rye. That's working really. The other thing that we're doing is we're looking at other ag engineers and saying, how can you help us solve these problems? And there's a company in Pennsylvania called Peckway Planter. And what Peckway Planter said was, you know, if you try to slice a piece of paper and I just hold one end of it, I don't care how sharp your knife is, you can't cut it. But if I hold both sides of it nice and still, you can slice right through it. So what they did was they created a set of wheels that fit on the front of the planter. I have these on my planter now. Well, you can see them. They're right here. So you got these two wheels that sit on the ground. They pinch the cover crop down to the ground so this slicer can slice right through them. This is the way my planter looks today. Fertilizer discs, use them for some research, not always. I've got the Yetter Shark Tooth residue manager on here. This is a monosem planter, relatively light planter for a no-till planter, so I stuck 130 pounds of weight on each row, and I took the plastic wheels off and put cast iron closing wheels on the back, and I can plant through anything with that. Almost anything. Seeding rates, you know, we're sticking our seed in the ground at about 32,000 for corn, 200,000 for soybeans. You may have to up the rates from what you're currently doing to get the stand count that you want. You're putting those seeds in a bit of an adverse situation, but that's a cornfield that's just been planted. You can sort of see this material on the side here. This part wasn't rolled yet, but that's a planted cornfield. Here comes the corn up through there. We didn't move it away from the planting zone at all. Nice thick mulch. There's the corn throughout the year. Here's the corn at the end of the season. That corn was 150 bushel corn. That wasn't research plots, that was just some production ground on the farm. The neighbor actually combined that, and his yield monitor was showing 150 bushel of corn going through there. And he said, I got 150 bushel of corn on my ground, and I watched you all year. You didn't do anything. You just planted it and went away. You didn't fertilize it. You didn't cultivate it. You didn't side dress it. You didn't do anything to it. I said, no, we didn't. That's Dr. Zanotti, who's doing some work with us at Rodale. You got to make sure the equipment's working right. You know, if it's pulling mulch up like this, you got bare soil in an organic system, that means weeds are going to grow. If it works for corn, it'll work for soybeans. If it works for soybeans, it'll work for pumpkins. If it works for pumpkins, it'll work for cucumbers or tomatoes, or I don't care what you're going to plant, we can make these systems work. This is some soybean research that we were doing. This is just showing you that different cover crops supply different amounts of residue and do a better job or a worse job of managing the weeds in the system. But if you can get soybeans this big in an organic system without doing any work, you know you're going to get soybeans. But there's a lot of things that we don't know. There's a lot of room for additional research. It's not like I can say I have the answer to every question on every farm and that this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's not, but it's a tool that we can put in our toolbox and can, again, encourage you to think differently about the resources you have on your farm and how you're going to put those to work. And the primary resource you have is the soil that you bought, inherited, stole, however you got it. But that soil resource is the most important resource you have, and you heard earlier today how we've always thought about it as the most worthless part of the farm equation. That's just not true. But you look at this, and we have farmers that say to us, okay, if I've got that much material there, I'm going to want to harvest it. That's too much of an input cost for me, particularly livestock guys. They'll want to harvest that off. So we said, okay, let's look at that. Let's look at what happens to the system if we harvest it and bale it. And we'll compare that to rolling it down and planting soybeans. So here it is. We harvested it off. We planted the soybeans. They came up. They looked nice for about 3 days. And then and how the combine found 17 bushel per acre in that mess is beyond me. But it was a good combining job. But here we have another treatment, and these were replicated plots, so this is all science-based stuff. And we had plots in the USDA research station at Beltsville, Maryland, and also in North Carolina. We're working on a partnership there. So they have the same plots, and their data shows the same thing. So here we are. We've got all this rye. We rolled it down. We planted soybeans into it. We have some weeds coming up in here. Weren't thrilled with it. We went from 17 bushels to 38 bushels. Here's the part that we don't understand what happened. June 1st, we had the shark teeth on there, and then we rolled through there and planted it. That was June 1st. This was a time of activity study. We also did the exact same treatment 1 week earlier, and we had 59 bushels, a 20 bushel bump in yield. The planter was set exactly the same. It was just 7 days earlier. We can't explain what happened. We don't know. We looked at weather data. We looked at everything else. Somebody asked me if we looked at the phases of the moon. We did not. But hey, I don't discount anything at this point because I don't know what happened, but there wasn't a weed to be found in any of those research plots. You can see that those beans are spotless. I mean, timing is everything. I understand that. But we don't understand what's going on there exactly, so there's room for more work. It's just a slide to show you how important it is to get your cover crop planted on time. You can see this picture was taken on April 1st, and this was at Penn State University. We were doing some plots with them. This is rye planted on August 25th. This is rye planted on October 15th. Picture was taken the same day. Which one of those is going to give you the biomass that you need to suppress weeds and do what it is you want it to do? You got to get it planted on time. In order to get a cover crop planted on August 25th means you need to adjust your rotation. That's why I talked about rotations first, because nobody harvests their soybeans or their corn that early. And maybe if you're taking corn silage. Corn silage makes life so much easier. but not everybody can do that. So what are you going to do to your system? You can do this after wheat, because your wheat you're going to bale, or you're going to combine your wheat sometime in July, bale the straw off. You can easily get it planted in August. But if all you want to do is corn or beans, it doesn't open that window very wide for you to get a cover crop in, and you're going to have to think about that. This just shows you that any weeds that are already sort of germinated in the system are in the system. That happens to be ragweed. The roller's not going to kill ragweed seedlings. It might hurt them, give them a bad day, but it's not going to kill them. So you have to actually physically look at the field. If you've got a lot of weeds or you've got perennial weeds in the system, you're going to have to use a different tool because that roller is not going to do it. If you're planting small grains with a grain drill, they're on like 7.5-inch rows and they grow in rows, and then if you roll them in the same direction that you planted them, they're going to lay in nice straight lines, and you could have gaps between there. Those gaps are not a big issue if you're using herbicide. If, on the other hand, you're depending on the cover crop mulch to suppress all the weeds, then you don't want to have those gaps. You don't want to have that bare soil. So what we've done is we put 50% of the seed in with the grain drill, and the other 50% of the seed we put in with a broadcast seeder mounted to the grain drill, and now there's no rows. So if there's a problem, there's probably a trick to solve that problem. If it works, like I said, with grain crops, it can work with vegetable crops. It can work with pumpkins. Here's a farmer. I just have a few examples of some other farms that are using the system now. And I think the USDA says right now we have about 300,000 acres being planted this way. That's what they said last year. This is Jim Miller is the guy I know, but his father and his uncle own R&G Miller farms in Wisconsin. And I think they're up closer to 1,800 acres now, Jim told me, and about 400 cows. It is an organic farm. And what the Millers are doing is they put a roller on the front of the tractor, rolling rye, planting soybeans with a grain drill is the way they're planting their beans. But they did a test with the University of Wisconsin, and they were comparing it to their standard system, which was a moldboard plow and Cultivate for weed management. So you can see there's a strip here that was plowed, and their beans are on 30-inch rows, and they're cultivated. Over here is the same thing. There's one over here. It just went across the field in strips. This strip here was rolled and planted with the grain drill, so the beans are on 7.5-inch rows. And what Jim said was when they first did this, they were concerned because they thought they did a beautiful job of cultivating. And over here you see that bluish-green haze is actually some rye trying to stand back up. And they thought that was going to be an issue. Turned out that, here's Jim's father. He said when it was time to, you can see the leaves are just starting to turn yellow. Over here where they cultivated, it's nothing but solid foxtail. I don't know if you can see that, but the whole field is from here over is foxtail. Where they planted with the roller, there wasn't a weed in the plot. Where they did all the extra work and cultivated, they only got 24 bushels of soybeans. Where they did no extra work, they just planted it and forgot it, they got 32 bushel. More beans, less work, fewer weeds. This is a farm it's in Tennessee, but it's really just right on the Kentucky border, so it's northern Tennessee. And it's Alfred and Carrie Ferris's farm. We had a field day there, back of my head. This is Alfred here. This is no-till corn into hairy vetch. This is no-till soybeans into rye. What Alfred said was, at the field day, he said, in this soybean field, he said, I will pay anybody $1 for every weed they can find in that 22-acre organic field. Not many organic farmers would say that. The really sad part was we were all looking for $1. I mean, yeah, people spread out and were looking for weeds. It was kind of sad. But not many people can say that even if you're spraying Roundup. You wouldn't want to pay people $1 for every weed they could find. I've been fortunate to be able to travel around a little bit and look at these systems. I was in Argentina in November. They're using the system here. This plot here, they were doing some grazing. They were seeing if they could pre-graze sections and keep animals on there for a certain amount of time to graze some of that cover off. After they rolled it and after they planted the soybeans, they ran cattle in there for a little bit and grazed different things off. But you can see the beans coming up there through these different covers. Here they have the roller. Their roller was mounted on the back of the tractor. They rolled the day I got there early in the morning, and they were just rolling there. They had about 500 acres that they were rolling. The morning before I got there, it had just rained 5.5 inches. The guy who was taking me along, I don't speak Spanish, so I had a translator. The guy that was with me said, "Don't worry, I brought boots because I know you're going to want to walk out in the field." Every field around this farm was literally underwater. There was standing water and everything. It looked like a giant lake, just thousands and thousands of acres of lake, about 5 inches deep. And when we got there, they were rolling cover crops and planting soybeans. So we took a shovel. The guy who owns the farm, and this is a large farm. They farm 34,000 acres. They have 14,000 acres certified organic, 20,000 acres that's conventional but transitioning to organic. Corn and beans, for the most part. All their beans go into a soy press. They press oil and sell organic oils. And the corn, I'm not sure what they do with it. But the guy who manages this particular farm said, "Where's all the water?" We took a shovel and we dug down. We dug down about 2 feet. That's as much as we could dig in 2 minutes. And the whole profile of the soil was just moist all the way down. He said, "I got every drop of water that came in there. Nothing ran off, nothing got lost. It's all in the soil where I can use it, where everything else," they said, "we're going to be waiting weeks to plant in the fields next to this." This was the owner's son, manager. You can see we're in the middle of about 400 acres there that they were rolling. These rollers, you can build them in every different size and configuration that you want. Pull them with pull a grain drill behind it. This was just a farmer who sent me a picture. I'm not even sure where he's from. This was a farmer in California planting eggplant behind rolled cover crops. When he first sent me this picture, I was really concerned. Tom Willey, he's an excellent grower. And I said, "Boy, why are these eggplants so small and these so big?" He's trying to get rid of black plastic. Black plastic, I don't have any vegetable growers here? Nobody I see? Okay. Black plastic, he's in the Central Valley of California. When he took this picture, he said it was 104 degrees. You lay out in the field when it's 104 degrees and throw a piece of black plastic over you and see how you feel as a microbe. He said, "So it doesn't really fit my system." He said that the temperature underneath that mulch was 10 to 15 degrees cooler, so he really likes that system, but he didn't believe that the roller would kill the cover crop. So he said, "I waited 30 days to plant the eggplant." Well, 30 days in the life of an eggplant is an eternity. And he said he didn't start with new transplants. He kept them in a shade house. So he said, "I'm surprised they lived at all." It really was amazing, but the system does work. Here's a farmer planting pumpkins on Long Island in New York State. He's planting sorghum Sudan grass, rolling it, and then spraying it with Roundup. Planting pumpkins. Anybody that grows pumpkins knows there's only two things that sell a pumpkin: a handle and cleanliness. You do not want to spend all your time washing pumpkins. He said, "I spend half my income getting pumpkins washed because you got to pay people to wash them. There's no good way to wash them. With this system, you don't have to clean pumpkins. Why not?" These are some farms in Italy. A friend of mine who works at Iowa State University was on a sabbatical in Italy this past winter. So these pictures are about a year old, and they're rolling cover crops there and planting vegetables. You can plant with a transplanter. Here's a horse-drawn version. Here's a 30-footer. That one went to West Africa, a large Dutch farm, planting there. Here's some that we're using on raised beds for vegetable production. Here's a farmer that came up to me at the Acres Conference in December, maybe 2-3 months ago. His name is Mark Dudlaw. Mark said I could use these pictures, so I'm using them with his permission. That doesn't look like Mark standing there. But this is his rig. He farms 1,400 acres in Wisconsin, northern Wisconsin. And Mark said that what happened was in 2008, his father was diagnosed with cancer. And they suspected that it could be from some of the ag chemicals that he was using. So they decided to begin to transition their farm away from conventional into organic. So Mark now farms his farm organically, and Mark's one of those guys, he's either in or he's out. So he said, I didn't play around with I told him, my advice to him was, take 50 acres, play with the system, see how it works. He did 640 acres to see how it worked. And this is his rye field. That's his planter going through the field. He rolled his system twice. He pre-rolled it, and then he came back and put the roller on the back of the planter again and rolled it a second time because his planter design is different, and it doesn't have near the pressure and the crimping action that our design has. But it did work. There's his soybeans, 640 acres. He said, I planted ground that was so wet, most years I never got a crop out of it. This year he said I got 50, 60 bushel beans out of that same ground. So we know the system can work. There it can. This is his roller here. It's a 60-foot roller. He rolls 60 feet at a time. He's got 2 of those plus a 40-footer, and he's got one in South Africa that they pull with oxen. So we know the system can work again at scale. It is scale neutral. Here's a 30-foot roller in Illinois. This farmer is not organic. But just like Howard, what he said is, if I can roll cover crops, improve the health of my soil, and not have to spend money on Roundup, I'm going to make more money. Why wouldn't I do it? You know, the benefits just outweigh anything that's negative. But here's a person that is using a piece of 2x4 with a piece of angle iron screwed on the bottom, crimping the floor of a greenhouse. It doesn't matter what scale you're at. You can make the systems work. They don't preclude us from using herbicide if you want to. This happens to be organic herbicide, clove oil, but you could spray Roundup on the system if you had weeds breaking through. We also have high residue cultivators, or tools that can come in and rescue the cash crop if, for some example, you have, or some situation where you have weeds going through there. So again, ag engineers can design tools that can go through all of this stuff. There's a field that's been cultivated and cleaned up and ready to mature. And if you have an irrigation system, it doesn't preclude you from using drip irrigation or on vegetables or overhead irrigation. It doesn't stop you from doing anything else that you're already doing. I tell everybody the worst you can possibly do is what you're already doing. It doesn't stop you from doing that. It's tools that can help you build the health of the soil. There's some things that we need. If you're interested in doing research or on-farm research, there's things that we absolutely need. We need some breeding for cover crops. Right now for cover crops, we're all taking sort of off-the-shelf materials, things that are out there that we don't know much about. Nobody's done any breeding work with them. We don't just plant corn and go, oh, I don't know what variety it is. It's just corn. Just beans. It's some beans that have been laying around. No, but that's what we do with cover crops. So we need a lot more work on cover crop breeding. We need to do some more work on planter configuration, again, to get these planters, to get the seed in the ground when and where we want it. We need more research, particularly in local areas. Like, I don't know what's going to work best in Ontario because I've never farmed in Ontario, but we need some research on what's going to work well here. We need to look at the relationships between cover crops and weather patterns so we can get cover crops that are going to work well there. And then this big kind of Pandora's box on cover crop mixes and what we're going to be doing with that. I have some handouts over here that are free. You're welcome to take them. I do have a book that I wrote on this, and I only brought like 10 copies along. If somebody's interested, they're there. If you're not, that's fine, whatever. And that's how you get in touch with me if you have questions and you're not here. I'll be here tomorrow for questions on this subject in the breakout sessions. But if you want to email me, you can do that too. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.